Good morning. This is Kenneth and Heather with the Advancing Equity Coalition, here to give you our quick rundown and recap of what went down last night at the school board meeting. How are you doing today, Heather?
I'm good. The sun is shining. It's a beautiful day, and we were thrilled, maybe, or therefore watching a very long board meeting last night.
Yeah. So last night's board meeting, it was two parts. The first one was a special business board meeting to vote on a few items, and then the second was a committee of the whole meeting to cover an update on the CDD. So Heather, do you want to give us a quick overview around what was discussed?
Yep. So the first thing that we heard during that special business meeting was the vote on Tyler Johnson Day, which will be Friday. We'll get into that a little more later. We also heard a vote on a return to school for middle school and secondary students. We got a very long and detailed COVID update, along with some of the planning that we'll be looking at for when kiddos return back to school. And then we went into the committee of the whole meeting, which was an update on the CDD progress. And in that, we learned that buildings have received their budget tie-outs and their projected attendance. Families should be getting their placement letters in mid-March. And we were reminded that there will be a second lottery that will be happening very soon. That was kind of the bulk of the information.
Yeah. There's a lot that was covered. And so we thought the most important information that was shared last night was the conversation regarding the return to in-person school for middle school students and high school students. So here's some information around what's going to happen for middle school students and the process for returning them to in-person. So we have April 19th is the first day for sixth grade students to go back to school. And then April 20th will be the first day for seventh and eighth graders to go to school. So giving sixth graders an opportunity who've been in sixth grade now for three-fourths of the year to finally see their buildings, to help navigate that, and learn what it means to be a middle schooler in person. And then our seventh and eighth grader students will return to in person the following day. Um, there's a lot that's going on. Again, middle school students and families will have the choice around whether they want to go back, and same for high school students. Um, and it'll be an option for students to choose whether they want to be in person or go back, or stay in distance learning. Um, Go ahead, Heather.
Well, and then we also learned some details. So high school students will actually be going back a week earlier. So they'll be getting that, and there will be some opportunities for them. And same thing for the ninth graders. They have had a whole year of being a freshman, but they haven't been in those hallways at all, and so they'll have a whole day to themselves before the rest of the students come back.
Yep. And what's not on here actually is that between now and April 19th, there'll be more in-person services for sixth through eighth, or sixth through 12th graders, I should say. And that's going to be scaffolded in. And then the return to full in person will be, again, up to the choice of parents and families. Will begin in April for high school, April 12th for high schoolers, and then April 19th for middle schoolers. So there's a lot happening. I thought something else that was interesting is is the challenges that the district is facing with transportation, because Metro Transit has different standards and, restrictions on how many people can be on a bus than what our school buses and school districts have, and that's a challenge for the capacity. And so, one important thing to note is that, um, there's going to be mileage reimbursements for families who are who can drive their children to school, in order to try to get some bodies off the bus to create more, capacity for students who absolutely need transportation for their families. So there's so many small logistical things like that for the district to figure out, but it seems like they presented a plan last night to the board to try to tackle those things.
And we heard from the board really clearly that this was kind of the governor wants this to happen. We heard that message over and over again.
Yeah,
Um,
so it's just good to get details after the governor made his announcement that we have to go back. And so it's good to hear from Minneapolis. What does that look like? So we have more to share in our longer video, but let's transition to our most valuable moment and our do better moment. So Heather, you want to kick us off with your most valuable moment?
Yes, my most valuable moment was listening to Associate Superintendent Rochelle Cox talk about how students receiving special ed services will have an opportunity to enter the building ahead of everybody else. They're going to get their own week to adjust back into these spaces. I think that's a very big difference from the way we saw elementary to go back. I recognize that all of this is new and we're learning as we go, but to me that was a really key learning and shifting that we've done in just such a short amount of time.
Yep, for sure. My most valuable moment was Tyler Johnson Day. I thought it was a really emotional, really well done acknowledgement of Tyler Johnson and everything he's accomplished, and obviously his deep, deep connection to Minneapolis public schools and North Minneapolis specifically. I was struck, I think, by thinking about what would it look like for Minneapolis public schools to really acknowledge the greatness that we see in Tyler Johnson in in every single Black child in Minneapolis public schools. Like, what would that mean for our students and how they experience it? But also, how can we acknowledge the greatness that Tyler Johnson exhibited before Tyler Johnson proves it to us, right? How do we make sure that we see the brilliance and we see the greatness, and Minneapolis public schools fosters that greatness and brilliance in every single black child before that child proves it to us? And so I think, it serves as a good reminder around what our students are capable of. And I think it's important for us to start thinking about how do we make sure that we acknowledge and see that greatness, whether that's in sports, academics, art, theater, music, whatever, right? How do we make sure we acknowledge and see that greatness before we ask students to prove it to us?
Absolutely. Well, my do better moment is a little bit about community engagement and communications. Like there was a lot of information last night, but I sometimes when I watch the board meeting can't help it. I put on my parent hat and I'm like, what do I need to know? What's changing for my kids? And that was only stated once really clearly, and it feels like every person could open with that, like, hey, this is what is happening and this is when kids are going back. That's what I was really listening for. So I think if we are going to consider board meetings, community engagement, we kind of need to think a little bit less about like all of the data we want everyone to know and just be like, okay, but if they walked away with one thing, we want them to know when school opens. And even if, I mean, I think we do have to know all of those other things, but it's okay to repeat pivotal points once in a while in a really long meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the district has plenty of opportunities coming up to
Yep.
better engage communities and show us that they can and have the interest of doing so. So we'll see how they take that opportunity. And I'll wrap up with my do better moment is around, kind of the conversation around testing that took place last night. We know that, from the federal government and from the state, they want to make sure that states are taking their standardized tests for students. And we heard, the conversation last night being about, we would make a different decision if we could. How can we help students opt out and make sure that's an option for them? How can we balance instructional time? How do we make sure we maximize instructional time? Is there anything we can do with the tests? And I get that. And I think that last point is really important, right? Around we only have one quarter in person with our students, with our older students. And so, how can we maximize the instructional time and maybe not spend as much time testing? But also, this pandemic, we keep saying this pandemic has exacerbated our gap, but we don't know to what degree that's actually taken place. And it's important for us to have that information. And so I would prefer to have seen the district and the board really talk about how are we going to do everything that we can to get the information necessary to understand how this pandemic has impacted the learning of our students, because we keep saying that we're in an academic crisis and this has only made it worse. But then when it comes to the opportunities to better understand the degree of that crisis and how deeply it has impacted our families and our students, we're saying, oh, we don't really want to do that. And I just would hate to see the narrative start now to start to underscore the impact of what we see in August when that's widely reported and that information is shared out. So that was my do better moment. And we have a lot to say about all these topics that we just shared. So if you want to check it out, head over to our longer video. We'll be sharing that shortly. And thank you so much for listening.
Bye.